So there's some good news today. We'll start out with good news. Usually we don't start out with good news. Usually we end with it. But we're going to start with it today because it's kind of breaking. This is a Supreme Court ruling. So here's what happened. The Supreme Court says federal law protects LGBTQ workers from discrimination. So here's what's going on here. Federal civil rights law protects gay, lesbian, and transgender workers. The Supreme Court ruled Monday, that's today. The landmark ruling will extend protections to millions of workers nationwide and is a defeat for the Trump administration, which argued that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that bars discrimination based on sex did not extend to claims of gender identity and sexual orientation. So here's what that's referring to. This is the rule that the Trump administration is going after, or that, finalized. The Trump administration finalized this rule, transgender health protection reversed by Trump administration. So this is what the Trump administration did recently. The Trump administration on Friday, that's this past Friday, finalized a rule that would remove non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people when it came to healthcare and health insurance. So basically, they had this rule that sex discrimination. Here's what they're saying. They define sex discrimination that only applies when someone faces discrimination for being male or female. It does not protect people from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So basically, somebody could deny someone healthcare rights if they are transgender. That's essentially what this opens the door to, what the Trump administration did. Because that's just what amazing priorities. I mean, how do you... I mean, look at everything that's going on in the world. Look at everything that's going on in the world right now. We're amidst a pandemic, by the way. It's not over. It didn't go away. It's still happening. People are sick. People are dying. People are going to, economically, we're going to be crushed by this. We already are. People can't make rent. People have to choose between food and rent. There's civil unrest at historic proportions because our law enforcement isn't law enforcement at all. It's just a systemic, racist, legalized gang with a license to kill. And the Trump administration looks around, they go, you know what we need to do? Let's make it harder for transgender people to get health care. Let's just be horrible to transgender people for no reason whatsoever. I guess J.K. Rowling and Donald Trump have the same self-help advisor, somebody who does advisory classes at Hate Inc., and they just wake up and they're like, one of the best things you can do for self-care, do like 10 push-ups and then marginalize transgender people for no reason whatsoever. Just crap on them for no reason. Just make their lives even harder for no reason whatsoever. Just to be a horrible human being. Do that. So this is what the Trump administration is looking to do. They wanted a rule that said, oh, well, you can... It's just if someone's transgender, you can discriminate against them. That's fine. That's fine. That whole sex discrimination thing, that only refers to biologically born male or female. If you're transgender, you can do whatever you want. That doesn't matter. That's what Trump wants to do. And now the Supreme Court ruling, which, presumably this Supreme Court ruling will have some consequences for that rule that Trump put into effect. But let's read on here. The ruling itself. Now, here's what's interesting here. It was a 6-3 ruling. So here's what it says. An employer who fires an individual for being homosexual or transgender fires that person for traits or action it would not have questioned in members of a different sex. Sex plays a necessary and undistinguishable role in the decision, exactly what Title VII forbids. So what's interesting here is, so here's what it said. On its terms, the decision is only about discrimination in the workplace. So Trump's thing is about discrimination in healthcare. But here's what they go on to say. But it inevitably opens the door to a host of other challenges to discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or transgender status on the ground that it, too, is impermissibly based upon sex. In that respect, only the court's 2015 ruling recognizing the constitutional right to a same-sex marriage may be equally as significant. So this, in other words, even though this ruling is specific to the workplace, it will likely present a challenge for Trump's new rule because it's interpreting this Title VII as the discrimination of sex applies to sexual orientation. It applies to sexual orientation. So that means it applies to LGBTQ people as well. That discrimination of sex applies to members of the LGBTQ community as well, not just biologically male or female based on birth. That's what they're saying as far as Title VII. So that's what's going on there. Now, I really want to read. So the best part is the dissents here. All right. So Samuel Alito, one of the dissents. Here's what he said. Even if discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity could be squeezed into some arcane understanding of sex discrimination, the context in which Title II was enacted would tell us that this is not what the statute's terms were understood to mean at that time. So basically what he's saying, like, well, even if this is the case, which who knows if anyone can determine that. That's basically what he's saying in a flowery way. He's like, well, even if sex discrimination refers to people who are different than me, that's what he's saying. He's like, look, even if you're saying sex discrimination applies to things that don't apply to me as a straight guy, even if it applies to other things that don't apply to me, even if that's the case, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm just a judge. What do I know? Chances are when they wrote this thing, that's not what they had in mind. So whatever. What a great deflection by Samuel Alito. And somebody else tweeted this out, but someone else tweeted this. Is he gonna apply that same logic when he's reading the Second Amendment? Yeah, I bet he doesn't. All right. So now here, Brett Kavanaugh. Here, this is according to the CNN article. Another conservative on the bench acknowledged the social and political progress achieved by members of the LGBTQ community, but nonetheless dissented. So here's what Brett Kavanaugh said. Listen to this deflection. Now, when people are dissenting and they have no valid argument whatsoever, what that's telling you is that their only dissension is the fact that they're just bigots. They're like, we have no legal basis for anything what we're saying. We're just bigots. Just like this Trump rule, it's just bigotry. There's no getting around it. Who does it help? It helps nobody. It hurts transgender people. That's all it does. That's all Trump's ruling does. And that's all being against this. That's all it does. It just marginalizes a group of people who are already marginalized. That's all it does. That's why the dissents, there's no logical basis for any of these dissents. They're just making stuff up. Well, here's Brett Kavanaugh's. They have advanced, powerful policy arguments and can take pride in today's results. He's referring to the LGBTQ community. Under the Constitution's separation of powers, however, I believe that it was Congress's role, not this court's, to amend Title VII. I therefore must respectfully dissent from the court's judgment, Kavanaugh wrote. Here's what Brett Kavanaugh is saying in a very blunt way. I don't think it's the place of a court of law to interpret the law. That's what Brett Kavanaugh is saying. I don't think it's a court of law's place to interpret the law. Samuel Alito, I think they probably meant something else when they wrote this. Those are their dissents. Why are those their dissents? Because they can't just come out and say, hey, we're homophobic bigots and we just want laws that make us feel good. They can't just straight up say that. So instead, they need to put forth this bullshit. No, I don't think it's... Court of law shouldn't interpret the law. I'm Brett Kavanaugh. I like beer. There you go. But this ruling is some good news. And when you look at the dissents and you see that level of delusional mental gymnastics, it's saying that they're only dissenting out of hatred and bigotry. And they can't come out and say that. Just like Trump's rule is only based on hatred and bigotry, but they can't come out and say that. That doesn't sound nice. So instead, they have to just BS around it. All right, so that's a little bit of good news. In a current climate that really does warrant some good news.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news it together and make